At 25, around 6 years or so, my body fell really ill. In retrospect, I had symptoms that started about at age 16, and I was diagnosed with Lyme disease, and I walked down at that point, alternative path to healing the Lyme disease. I was told at the time, you will get sicker before you get better, which is what happened. And over the course of those 3 years, I added symptom after symptom, diagnosis after diagnosis onto a long list. Today, I no longer identify with diagnosis, not only because I'm not ill, but also because at some point along the way, I had to shed diagnoses to heal as well. Some of the diagnoses that may have had some truth in them at the time included Lyme disease, Hashimoto's thyroiditis, autoimmune disease, persistent mono or chronic epstein-barr, back to remembering them, insomnia, chronic fatigue syndrome, fibromyalgia, IBS with colonic spasms, eczema, chronic conjunctivitis, and though never officially diagnosed, anxiety. The thing that saved my life is a belief I had. From the moment I was diagnosed, I believed, for whatever reason, that I was going to heal. I didn't know when, I didn't know how, but I knew someday and somehow I was going to heal. Even as I got sicker, even as more diagnoses got added to the list, I never once, and I know it's kind of unbelievable, I have no singular memory of ever really trying on for size the idea that I wouldn't heal. And it wasn't that I was so stubborn or proud, it just didn't feel right. It felt right that I would heal. My body continued to decline. And I had a moment about 3 years in where my life had a pause and I had a chance to really assess and evaluate my health. And I could see that the truth was, after all this time, I was no better. I was much, much worse. And this was the true dark night of the soul. I was incredibly lost. I didn't know where to go. And some piece inside of me was called in that moment to a fast. And so I said, well, I got nothing, so I'll do that. And I felt drawn to do this long water fast. I was open to fasting up to 30 days. I said I'd take it a week at a time. I fasted a week, all went fine. I was into that second week, a few days in, when things really started to change. And I started feeling very ill, extremely disoriented and dizzy, fatigued, just bad. And I started considering breaking it. And the question I asked myself in that moment is, am I feeling this bad because I haven't eaten food in 10 days, and this is how you might feel, but it is helping? Or am I feeling this bad because I am killing myself? And the answer was, I didn't know the answer. And that question stirred around with me for a half day or so, when finally pushed to my breaking point, literally on my knees in the kitchen, starved, spent, fatigued, and lost, I asked myself the question again, am I helping or am I killing myself? And at that moment, my answer blurted out of my mouth and I heard myself shouting, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know, 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 I don't know. And in that moment, everything shifted down from my head to my heart, and I had a deep knowing that said, you cannot think your way out of the dark. You can only feel your way out. Until that point, I had spent my whole time trying to think my way out of illness. I had researched everything, studied everything, ran many self-experiments, all in an effort to understand. And it was clear in that moment I wasn't going to be able to understand. And the wisdom was clear, your heart's gonna lead the way out. And from that moment on, I let my heart lead the way out of illness. Now I got that second piece to the puzzle, a clear intention, I am going to heal. With an elevated emotion, my heart's gonna lead the way. That path led me exactly where I needed to go, getting the right information at the right time and things feeling serendipitous and starting to find out what I needed to find out, and it led me right to meditation. And I remember one time sitting down in a meditation and I said, I'm going to instruct my body on what I want it to do. And at that point, there was a lot of disagreement around what my diagnoses even were. Some thought it was an infectious disease like Lyme disease, where there was a foreign invader attacking my body. Some thought it was an autoimmune disease where my immune system was reacting for no reason. And so I sat down in meditation and I said, okay, I'm gonna talk to my body about what I want it to do. And in that moment, I burst into tears because I said, I don't even know what I want it to do. Do I want to tell my immune system to rev up and fight this bad germ and go get him, like, you got this? Or do I want to tell my immune system to calm down, there's nothing to fight here, you're safe? And I realized I didn't even know what to tell it. And I was so overwhelmed by that feeling that in that moment I could transcend it and said, you know, I don't even need a diagnosis to heal. I can get bigger than the diagnosis. My body doesn't speak in the language of diagnoses anyway. All I have to do is heal what's going on, and I need no labels to do that. So that was the moment when I shed all the labels of diagnoses. They weren't serving me, and I got in deeper touch with the body and said, this heart's gonna lead the way out. During this time, my parents were moving out of the house that I had grown up in, and they had called me to say, would you come home and clear out your childhood bedroom? And so eventually I flew home and did that. And as I was going through my things, I found, among other things, a paper, a senior thesis that I had wrote when I was in high school, which was entirely about how to use the mind to heal the body from illness. What the Bleep had come out when I was in high school, and I had watched Dr. Joe, and I was fascinated by what he was saying. I read his book at the time, and at the same time, my mom had been diagnosed with lupus, and she was working to heal her body naturally from lupus when doctors said it wasn't possible. So for about my last year in high school, we were around the dinner table talking about how we could use the mind and other modalities to truly heal the body. And I got so interested that I wrote about it in school and studied it in school. And then somehow filed it into the back of my memory to where I hadn't even thought about it in years, until I'm in my childhood bedroom holding this paper, an artifact from the past with a map to the future, and could feel my past self writing this for me. I didn't know all that time in high school I was writing it for me. But then I got it, hold it, read the first page and said, I have known this all along. So then I took my map from my past, from my now, out into a forest. And this was really the climax of my healing journey. I took a summer off of work and I went out to a forest in Oregon. And I said, I am not leaving here until I can be different walking out than when I walked in. And I stopped all the other modalities, many of which were working for that period of time. And I said, all I'm gonna do is be here with this river, with these trees, with good food and meditation. And I'm not getting up until it's different. And I can't tell you what happened for sure out there in the forest, but I can tell you I walked out different than I walked in. And when I got out, big things started to happen now. Now that little tiny spark of healing was bigger, and now some of the big symptoms came off, like the fatigue. I remember the first morning I woke up without the fatigue, but still in pain. And I had the shocking realization that fatigue and pain weren't the same. I had no memory that they weren't even the same. And I had such elation that I was like, you can get rid of this fatigue. And I remembered what that even was. And I just remember that morning so well, of waking up with that. And now I had all the motivation I needed to keep going. Obviously, I knew this was a matter of time. I was on the path. And a point that Dr. Joe talks about, is that I ultimately decided to, part of leading by the heart, letting the heart lead the way, that elevated emotion, was that I fell in love with the experience. I really loved this process. It was really challenging. I was in a lot of pain. It was like this problem that you didn't know how to solve, so it was incredibly intellectually challenging and emotionally challenging. All that was true, but I loved it. I decided that I was on this adventure to save my life, and what could be more exciting or rewarding than that? So then it was about a year after that I went to my first advanced retreat with Dr. Joe in Niagara Falls. And I showed up there and befriended a woman that was in my group, and this beautiful woman who had been to 6 or 7 retreats, and she was kind of showing me the ropes, and I'd ask her some questions and she'd tell me what was going on. And she was probably in her late 30s. She had very severe MS, and she had tremendous difficulty walking, used assistance to walk, and had some difficulty talking. And she knew about some of my experiences also. And a couple of days in, I said, I applied to, I knew she had too, we'd both applied to be healees for the coherence healing. And I said, do you know when we typically find out about that? I haven't heard anything yet. When do you kind of find out? And she said, oh, it'll just be in the next day or two. You should expect to hear. And she said, but I want you to know that I have already decided that if I get picked and you don't get picked, I am asking them to give you my spot. And like cracking my heart wide open, I burst into tears and I said, you can't give me that. And she says, oh, but I've already healed. And it cracked me wide open, and because the love you give gives you back, of course, we both were selected, and we didn't have to choose, or I gave her mine, and she gave me hers. And I don't know what was more therapeutic for me those days, actually receiving the coherence healing or receiving that gift from that woman who was willing to give absolutely anything for me, a stranger really, and to feel love so pure like that made that event the beginning of the end of my dance with chronic illness. And it was the months following that I had the first moment when I no longer could even remember what the pain felt like. People ask sometimes, when do you know you are healed? And I say, because one day, for no real reason at all, you begin speaking in the past tense. And the first time I noticed myself speaking in the past tense, I was sick instead of I am sick. I felt all those emotions that I had been dreaming about for all that time, the elation, the gratitude, the mystery, the miracle, and ultimately how I felt and how I still feel is like a walking miracle, that I am walking as a miracle. That's how it feels. That's how it feels still. That moment, even when I first started not feeling the pain, was 1.5 years ago. It still feels like a miracle. I know what I did. I can tell you what I did. But somehow what I did was greater than the sum of its parts, and somehow it still feels like this extraordinary miracle. What is most interesting to me about my story is not how meditation, the kind where you sit on a pillow and close your eyes, helped heal me, though it did. The most interesting part of my story to me is how I turned my life into a meditation, is about how I married an elevated emotion with a clear intention, with my eyes opened. And I really walked like that at all times. And yeah, I had people say things to me. I remember this one woman I was talking to, and I talked a lot about my situation. I didn't talk about the pain. Most people around me don't even really know what I was feeling, but I talked a lot about the mystery and the wonder and what I was trying and the whole adventure of it. I talked about that. And it wasn't that I suppressed the pain or didn't feel it. I did. I just didn't dwell on it or talk about it. So it was one of these times I was talking to a friend from yoga, telling her about what new thing I was thinking through or trying, and she said, wouldn't it be better if you just decided that maybe you would never heal? Wouldn't it just be easier to think that way? Wouldn't that be better somehow? And I looked at her and I said, I understand. I understand what you're saying. I just happen to not believe that that's what will happen. I happen to believe that I will heal. I happen to believe that you are wrong. And I remember other people would say things like, well, at least you're going to get good at managing this disease. And I was like, with all due respect, I am not managing this disease. I am healing this disease. And it wasn't with hubris or pride. It was with deep humility that said, I can see that this is an impossible path. Nobody has my answer. Not the conventional treatments, not the alternative treatments. But I think there's a way to do the impossible anyway. And I'm going to do the impossible.